Okay, I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's exciting session that we've been planning to put on for quite some time. It's entitled Expert Insights, Strategies for Leading a Successful Digital Transformation in the Laboratory. And we can go to the next slide, please. And we're going to run through a couple of quick slides before we get into today's session with our expert panel. And we'll get through a couple of quick introductions and a couple of quick, summary slides about who Astrix is. Hopefully, you've had some interaction with Astrix technology in the past year or so. We have been working diligently, putting out a tremendous amount of content, bringing together the thought leaders in the lab informatics, and digital quality and compliance space through a series of webinars and webcasts. As an adjunct to that program, we wanted to bring together some of the, who we believe are some of the top minds in this space to lend their expertise and answer some pressing questions that are coming from you, the core constituents in this space. Before we get into that, let's tell you a little bit about who Astrix is in this space and what we do. We successfully deliver highly specialized services, processes, technology, as well as outsourced services to fundamentally transform how science-based businesses operate. And we do this in an effort to improve scientific outcomes and ultimately the lives of people everywhere. And just a couple of quick stats about Astrix, if you're unfamiliar with us as a company. We were established in the year 1995 and are privately held. We originated as the IT division of APBI, which is a life science research organization, and we operate from 7 offices in the United States and beautiful Costa Rica. And we have our headquarters in Red Bank, New Jersey. The type of customers that we work with and help are going to be Fortune 1000 life science enterprises, chemical companies, CPG companies, government research institutions. Generally speaking, we are helping companies that have high, fast growth IT and outsourced needs and compliance needs. We are a market leader in dedicated digital transformation services and expert outsourced services for the scientific community. So that's a little bit about who we are. A couple of other things we want to go through. We can go to the next slide. In terms of the specific services that Astrix is delivering to customers, there's 4 core areas. Number 1, laboratory informatics services. This is where we're going in and from, the planning through the execution and then post implementation support, helping companies develop the technology stack of their lab. From there, digital quality and compliance services. This is a combination of services and best practices and technology, all designed to help ensure that you are staying ahead of the regulatory environment in which the R&D world has to operate in. We work with federal scientific staffing, so through organizations like the NIH under contracts to provide scientific staffing services to them, as well as general scientific staffing to organizations that we mentioned, all the different types of organizations. So those are kind of the 4 core services we deliver. We can go to the next slide. And then in terms of the value proposition, there's 4 areas that we like to talk about. First and foremost, partners in success. We do establish true partnerships and long-term partnerships with our clients. A lot of the success comes about because we bring domain and technology expertise that others simply do not have. This is a company of scientists, first and foremost, and we bring together hundreds of man-years of expertise that is simply unmatched in our space. Our services are expert level, and whether that's services around the implementation of LIMS or the services around, helping to understand the changing regulatory environment of the FDA. We bring those expert services to work. Processes and workflows. This is basically what we've developed over 25 years through hundreds of customers. These are going to be things that are somewhat predefined. It's a culmination of our expertise boiled into workflows and baked into processes that we deliver to our customers on a regular basis. So finally, before I introduce our speakers, one last slide I'd like to touch base on. We go to the next slide. Is the scope and the span. When we say our services span the complete life cycle of your scientific data systems needs, that's not lip service. We really do begin at the business process analysis and architecture phases. In these phases, our experts are coming in and they're really helping to define, first of all, what does your stack look like? What should it look like? What should it look like now, and how is it going to support the growth of your organization, and help you get your products into the market faster, whether that's on premise or in the cloud. From there, we're helping to select the right solutions. We have relationships with all the leading vendors in the space, whether those are ELN vendors, whether those are LIMS vendors, etc. We are working with them on a regular basis. We know them, we know what their technology is best at, and we know which ones to put into place to meet the needs of customers. Development and implementation, actually helping to develop and implement it, and then computer systems validation after it's in. From there, on-demand services, where we can bring in people, expertise, and processes to make sure your systems are operating at peak performance. And then finally, if you need it, we can staff the right people, either from a pure scientific standpoint or from a technical standpoint, to help you run those systems. So that's a little bit about Asterix. I want to kind of shift gears now, and let's get into our speakers. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dale. Dale's going to kind of get us kicked off. We can go ahead and shoot to the next slide. Great. Well, obviously, Dale is the CEO of Astrix, and he's a leader in providing innovative laboratory informatics solutions to the scientific community. He brings 22 years of proven success, great business approach, delivering deep scientific insight with an understanding of how technology and people will impact scientific industries. A strategy focus on issues related to value engineered solutions, and that's something that Dale talks about extensively. On-demand resource and domain requirements, being able to deliver services quickly and on an as-needed basis. So I'll let Dale kind of pick up from here and let him do his own honors from there, and then introduce some of the rest of the speakers. And then Dale, I'll be back on in just a moment with some of the questions to get kicked off with.
Excellent, Kevin. Thank you so much. And first and foremost, welcome everyone to this. I'm super excited about this panel and the discussions around a term and a category of digital transformation that has been just at the top of mind of all of us for quite a long time. And so Kevin, thank you for the introduction. As Kevin mentioned, I'm the CEO of Asterix Technology Group, and I've had a wonderful career over the last 20 plus years of helping companies derive value from connecting information, from implementing global laboratory-based systems and the services that come with that. So I'm super excited to be able to bring this panel of experts to the forum today that all have varying degrees of expertise across multiple industries, both life sciences and non-life sciences, in the laboratories and organizations that are adjacent to the laboratories. So I really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to the questions that we've got from each of you, and trying to take on this journey. And that's really what this digital transformation area is. It's a journey. It's a journey that each of us will take in our respective industries, and the maturity level of the organization is highly dependent on each of you. And we're going to talk about how this is absolutely achievable, and impact that some of these types of initiatives can have, and that we're seeing in the laboratories every day. So without further ado, I wanted to have the opportunity to introduce a colleague of mine who I've known for many years, Dave Dorsett. Dave has a tremendous amount of expertise in the industry, both from the business side and the pharmaceutical community, but as well as architecting, delivering, and supporting global laboratory informatics solutions. So with that, Dave, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. So yeah, as Dale mentioned, I've spent quite a bit of time both with the pharmaceutical industry and with some other manufacturing industries as well, batch and petrochemicals, consumer products, et cetera, really helping design data flows all the way from earlier on research all the way through the manufacturing space. These days, we now use this digital transformation term for a lot of the projects that were in essence had the same goals, going back many years. I've been involved both as a commercial vendor on that side of things, designing and architecting and running businesses to provide partial solutions to those things, but also sort of on the consumer side of it as well. So spent many years in pharmaceutical R&D, and I now do consulting work helping people actually make these transformations, through things. So thank you very much. Pleased to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Dave. Next, I'd like to introduce Srikanth Narayana. Srikanth, our VP of Digital Quality and Compliance at Asterix Technology Group, has more than 20 years of experience in the pharma, medical device, and biotech industries across all aspects of the quality compliance areas within those organizations. Srikanth?
Yep. Thanks, Dale. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on wherever you are. Excited to be here today and looking forward to the discussion. As Dale mentioned, my career predominantly has been within the life sciences space, helping clients manage their quality organizations, quality programs as it relates to FDA and their guidelines. And my focus predominantly has been around helping clients go through this whole complex navigational roadmaps of digital transformation, right? So, I'm very excited to be here and looking forward to some interesting questions and discussion.
Excellent. Thank you, Srikanth. Next, we have Larry Jones. Larry comes to us as the principal of Aegis Management and has a number of decades of experience as CEO of more than 7 technology companies, both private equity owned public companies, and has a lot of expertise in cybersecurity and IT systems. With a number of organizations, currently resides in Boulder, Colorado. Larry?
Yeah, welcome, and thank you for inviting me. As you said, I've got a lot of experience in the IT services space. I currently focus on 4 boards that I'm on, Asterix being one of them, and another company in the digital transformation space called Apps Associates. I've been focused on digital transformation over the past 4 years as a really exciting next evolution in the IT services space. And it's been pretty exciting to watch the evolution and different industries adopting at different times. As Dale said, I was the CEO of Coalfire, which is a cybersecurity consultancy. It's really opened my eyes to the cybersecurity threats and privacy issues that digital transformation exposes. We'll talk more about that later.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Larry. Next, we have Dr. Elliot Randall. Dr. Elliot Randall is the founder of Digital Lab Consulting, an organization that has over 25 years of experience, comes to us with a PhD in molecular biology, as well as deep domain expertise in the lab space, both from a technology development and delivery perspective. So we're super excited to have Elliot join us as well. Elliot?
Yeah, thanks very much, Dale. As you say, I've been in the industry for over 2 decades now. Started my life as a lab scientist, so I've sort of been there and done that from the scientific side of things before moving into the informatics space, working for a couple of technology providers before setting up Digital Lab Consulting. And like many other members on the panel, a lot of the projects we get involved in are in the digital transformation world. So I'm really excited by this panel and talking about how we help businesses through better use of technology to make the next step in their evolution.
Excellent. Thank you, Elliot. And that is our panel. So we're again, thank you everyone for joining, spending the time here to come in and learn a little bit more about what it means and how it can impact your organizations. I think this panel has a tremendous amount of depth and breadth around being able to deliver those types of solutions, and we're looking forward to discussing more with you. Kevin, back to you.
Yeah, Dale, thank you very much. And I think the first question was one of the ones that came up the most in the pre-question surveys. It was asked a number of different ways. So we boiled it down to this simple way: what does it mean to digitally transform your laboratory? So Dale, I'll pass it to you, and then let you take a swag at it and see if you want to pass it around from there.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm not surprised it's the highest frequency question that we've seen because it is a question that I get answered by customers very differently in all different capacities. And so digital transformation in the context of a laboratory, it does mean different things to different people depending on the maturity level of the organization, what systems that you've already invested in, whether you have anything at all. But really, let's step back and think foundationally. It's a couple of things. Number one, it's a journey. All right, and it's a journey that is not something that has to be a transformative end-all be-all boil the ocean approach. It can be taken in bite-sized chunks. It can be taken in workflow chunks where digitalization of the workflow end-to-end is defined and tackled, achieved, and then built on as a foundational element in the organization, and then built on from there. It takes the form of a technology stack, whether it's a investment that has been made over many years and purpose-built for the technology or for the therapy area that you may be working in, or the material area that you're working in over the course of the last 20 years, or it could be an investment of multiple systems, technologies, and people that have sort of evolved over many years and make it very challenging for us to do what digital transformation is set out to achieve, which is do things faster, cleaner, better, and enable us to make informed decisions of information that we have at our fingertips, but have yet to really be able to extract that in a rapid amount of time. And so the other piece of this, from my perspective, and I'm gonna ask Dave to chime in a second here on some of the more architectural aspects of this, but it's also about people and processes, right? If we do try to digitally transform a piece of technology, it's also impacting the way that our scientists work in the laboratory every day. And that's a daunting challenge in some aspects. And so I think we need to keep in mind that as we look at technology as the answer, we also have to ensure that our people and our processes are being updated, are being managed properly, and we're setting the right expectations that this is a journey we're going to go through together. We're not going to flip a switch and all of a sudden have access to everything that we ever dreamed of in the perfect business intelligence mapping and tools that we have access today. But it's really about working through this together and taking this in bite-sized chunks such that we can deliver to the organization in a commercially reasonable time frame, value in which is in the form of efficiency, productivity, and informed and predictive decisions, which Dave will talk a little bit maybe in his response. But Dave, let me pass to you from your perspective, working in the laboratory, both from a technology perspective, but also being the customer at a big pharma company. What does that mean to you?
Sure. So a couple thoughts building on some of the things that you actually pointed out as well. To me, digital transformation is at the end of the day all about people side of things. It's actually much less of a technology aspect of things. You can't go, regardless of what the vendors might say, you can't just go and buy a magic solution and then boom, deploy this system and you'll be digitally transformed. Doesn't work that way. So at its core, being transformative in a digital way is actually truthfully using the data in productive ways. And in this case, we're talking about supporting R&D. And so that might mean from decision making through documenting, through filings, through all the aspects, all the processes that R&D actually get involved with. It actually means, to me, moving those into digital modes. And that is a huge cultural challenge. It's more of a cultural challenge than it is anything else. As scientists, as people who work in all industries, right? We love email, we love Excel, we love, hallway conversations and all these other things. And I think it's important to realize that digital transformation doesn't preclude those or replace those. It's meant to actually augment those types of things. So it's not about actually turning all forms of communication and all forms of flow of information into a digital form, but it really is about, to me, when sort of directed in a productive way, it's really about identifying those parts of the organization that are being impacted by inefficient communication, particularly around the data, and actually going after those types of interdepartmental, typically, or across geographies, those types of communication patterns. And in between systems is another big sort of area of digital transformation, productivity. But at the end of the day, it's about actually sort of moving from a system-oriented approach to a data-oriented approach. It's not about your LIMS system and whose vendor that is, and it's not in your ELN and what vendor that is. It's actually about how those things are actually used to move R&D, and that's really what the transformation's about.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave.
All right, Dale, you want to pick up? You want me to pick up with the next round of questions here? We've got quite a few.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll try to get through as many questions as we can. I'm sure people would lot. Definitely.
Yeah, and again, for the folks that are on the call, it's great. We're starting to see those questions come in, and I want to encourage you to continue asking, keep sending them in. Okay, so let me read through this one a little bit slow. Dale, I'm going to let you choose the respondent to this. You'll best know. So what do you believe are the best practices on converting legacy data warehouses to better benefit from new technologies and data platforms like Databricks, DataQ, and others in order to enable more real-time business intelligence reports and enable AI? Would you like me to read that again?
I think I've got it. I think, probably the best, let's maybe do a teaming approach. Elliot, you want to take a shot at this one first, and then maybe Dave, I know you've got a lot of architecture experience as well.
Yeah, I can start things off with less of an architecture thing, but just what's the baseline for doing this. I think to use any of those technologies that you just described, any of those things that are now available to the industry. Many of them have been used in other industries before they've been used in pharmaceutical industry. But the one common thing is having a good, solid foundation, having good harmonized processes, harmonized data, and all those things. So if you don't have your data house in order, for example, or you're not using those technologies to achieve getting your data house in order, then it's very difficult to gain the main benefits from them. So I think seeing all of these exciting technologies that are available to us, it's important not to just try and use them. It's about understanding what your current situation is. It's about trying to, have a common language across the organization and just get those foundation things right, which may not involve technology at all in the first instance. As Dave was saying, it's about getting the people aligned, about getting the data clean, ready, and available to use, and get the most out of it through these exciting use possibilities. So yeah, I think that's where I would start from a foundational point of view rather than specifically an architecture point of view.
I'd like to jump in and say, one of the key important things before you get on this journey, and I like the word journey because it is a long multi-year journey, is to make sure you have a roadmap. And in the data world, you need a data roadmap because in today's world, the data is all over the place. I don't care how well you think you've done. It's dispersed over the entire organization, and build a roadmap to know how you're going to pull that data together, how you're going to integrate it, how you're going to rationalize it, and really how you're going to use it, even before you start thinking about all these applications and all the other technologies you're doing. So rationalizing your data strategy, your data governance is critical before you even talk about Databricks or any other technology that you're doing.
I think I'd add to that again as well, Larry. It's not just having the roadmap; it's knowing where in the first place, right? Sometimes this data, where is it? Who created it? Who uses it? How is it reused? Pretty crucial things before you go on the roadmap too.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, one thing I'll throw in is that the example technologies that were in the question are interesting. As somebody who's been sort of the geek technologist his whole career, a lot of the temptation is to, you've got a really interesting kind of cool, hammer. Let's go find where the nails are, kind of a thing. And so I really try to push folks I work with in the, again, I think I mentioned this before, and not a systems first approach to this at all. So the systems are the last thing. If you do your work correctly, from a scientific workflow perspective, from a data workflow perspective, the systems end up more or less kind of falling out at the end of the day. And your ultimate roadmap for these types of transformations actually really should be, I believe, system independent. Those things are going to change. Vendors are going to get bought and acquired and sold, and products are going to drop, and all these things are going to happen to the things that are actually, sort of operationally dealing with your data. The critical part is the data architecture at the end. And I couldn't agree more with the need for roadmaps, on this. Where do we stand? And really thinking about it not from the perspective of, as we always do, who creates the data, but who uses your data. So the data roadmap is absolutely critical. And one of the way we classically develop requirements and classically develop these things does not suit transformations very well, in the sense that it's not really about producing data, it's about using it at the end of the day. And driving a roadmap from that perspective, to me, that's the most important part. The technical pieces, the syntactic pieces, once you've got it, et cetera, are relatively straightforward, but getting the semantic alignments, getting the quality of data, to a point where you can actually use these types of tools is the biggest challenge in R&D. R&D is not like other industries in the sense of, our definitions of our critical data do change. That's the nature of R&D. And that creates a huge challenge for using technology, AI, ML, all those types of things, because actually the appropriateness of the data and the quality of the data is situationally dependent for the question you're trying to ask. Do I need to know the precise value for, for an aspect of the material that I'm trying to do a predictive model against, or do I just need to know if it's higher or lower than a threshold? And so the challenge in R&D and with these types of technologies is the precision actually sometimes of these approaches and everything actually ends up defeating the purpose. And we're not looking at sort of what we're semantically trying to achieve. We're looking at the technical part of what data we've got and how do we experiment with it.
Awesome. It's a great answer, obviously. Appreciate that. I think I know who this is going to be directed at, but I'll pose a question out there and see who wants to grab it. In digital transformation, when it comes to digital transformation, where does quality 4.0 come into play, and what are people seeing in the marketplace related to this?
Srikanth, you want to take that one?
Yeah, no, I got that. So an interesting question, right? So, end of the day, quality 4.0, that's been the adoption to quality 4.0 has been growing significantly over the last couple of years, right? So, and then one of the misnomer that's out there is quality 4.0 replacing traditional quality? The answer is no. The quality 4.0 is intended to build upon traditional quality, and it's usually a natural extension of all the advanced technologies that are being derived by Industry 4.0 to enhance the traditional best practices in the quality management area, right? So while it certainly includes digitalization of a quality management, more importantly, it's the impact of that digitalization on quality, people, process, and technology, right? And more importantly, also how that technology can improve your culture, your collaboration, your competency, and also more importantly, your leadership, right? So, but, saying that, the transition to quality 4.0 is not going to be as easy as people intend to or think. The reason is, there obviously, quality 4.0 talks heavily about big data, leveraging big data analytics, AI and ML, cognitive technologies, and all of those, and the transition is pretty challenging over there, right? And there are going to be obviously usual suspects around those challenges, which are your, quality is very disparate, they're stored in siloed system, and a lot has been talked about those things in the recent, in the marketplace. But what people are forgetting is some of the non-technology related issues that companies are facing, right? One is, if you look at it, the role of quality in the overall digital strategy is not clearly defined, right? The reason is most of the organizations see quality as a function that has clear and compelling, they don't see that, right? They fail to see what is the compelling role in delivering corporate digital strategy for them, right? That's mainly due to the fact that quality historically is seen as a department, or even like quality police, right? That's the word we use in the market to ensure compliance. So, you know, when quality organizations have to look at themselves and say, do we really want to be, our objectives or initiatives we're taking, do we need to be aligned with ensuring compliance, or do we need to be more of a performance-driven organization, right? That's going to be the key. So making sure that all the objectives and initiatives that the quality organization is putting in place are more performance-driven, and they need a support from the top executive management as well, right? Because quality needs to be a priority agenda on their leadership strategy. Right. And once you have this, the vision and the strategy aligned, then you can start with some of the like use cases, right? So you implement some of the pilots, you go in there and start with the small pilots, like use it, like when it comes to the quality world, we see most of the total cost of the quality is usually high is because of your CAPAs and deviations, time it takes to review and approve documents or SOPs, right? So start small with your AI and ML. And see where you can get some quick wins, right? And go do some pilots. But beware, right? Because you cannot talk about pilots without talking about pilot purgatory, right? Because you don't want to take on a pilot you cannot repeat it or you cannot scale it, right? So ensure that you're aligning all your pilots going back to the strategy or the roadmap that the organization is dictating. So you're not going and building this random act of digital projects out there, right? So that would be the one. The second thing is also, it's very important, how organizations, when you're moving towards quality 4.0, what is the shift that you need to think when it comes to quality culture, right? Because in today's world, there's a lack of quality culture, and if I have to say it, right? I mean, even when I was reading the recent survey, about 1/3 of the companies believe that lack of quality culture is one of their top challenges in achieving quality objectives, right? So, you know, it's very important to make sure that, you know, quality is set up and the quality culture is set up to enable your technology transformation, right? Quality is just not quality team's responsibility, but it's usually should be cross-functional, and everybody should have a skin in the game, and they need to take on ownership and accountability for quality as well. So just making sure that your quality is, everybody's accountable for it, everybody's responsible for it, it's just not quality, is actually going to create wonders when you go through this digital transformation piece of it, right? And then the last one, obviously, you know, I would say, and it goes back to what Dale and Dave, everybody was talking about, the people aspect, right? Because historically, quality never hired people coming from data scientist background or statisticians, right? So, but given that focus of big data and analytics and cognitive technologies that 4.0 is bringing, the whole talent acquisition strategy or talent development or talent retention strategy that needs to go around building your quality organization has to drastically change, right? You need to start thinking, bringing in different kind of skill sets and skill sets into your organization so you can actually get into the right path of moving towards quality 4.0.
I think I think what you mentioned there about the people and the processes and the skill set is interesting, and you brought up statistics there as well. I think quality by design, by its nature, takes on a more statistical element. So you need those skills to design the experiments in the first place, and statistical design of experiment is not necessarily natural to people who were trained in sciences 20, 30 years ago. It's probably a slightly newer concept. And it also, in a broader digital transformation world, it's very much aligned with robotics and automation. So having to have a large design space, having to do lots of smaller changed experiments through design of experiment naturally fits really well with automation, which fits really well with creating and managing more data, and ultimately ties back to a broader digital transformation.
Yeah, and you know, that's a great point, right, Elliot? And also, just from a people standpoint, it's not that we are, you know, like a quality assurance person or a quality control person, the jobs will still be there. Just the skill sets of what was going to transform itself, right? What historically they were looking at from a skill set standpoint that's going to change drastically, and that is changing drastically today.
Excellent. Well, I want to make sure we get to some of the questions that have been coming in live as we've been going through. So, one of the ones, I guess, Dale, I'll let you either take or just distribute this question appropriately. What considerations should be made for implementing on-prem versus a SaaS solution?
Well, that's another great question. Why don't we start? Maybe Larry, you can give some context around on-prem versus SaaS. What your thoughts are? Larry, you there?
Yeah, I'm on mute. Yeah, I think the big trend today is to push everything into the cloud and use SaaS applications, right? And there's a lot of advantages for that, from both a cybersecurity point of view, from a cost point of view, from an aggregation point of view, but it's not for everybody. So, every organization has to make their decision relative to how much data they want on-prem, protected by their on-prem, versus how much they want to push up into the cloud. And I think, that, in part of your data roadmap and your data strategy has to be, where is this data going to reside? Where's the best place for it to reside? And whether you're going to take advantage of the cloud value added, or you're going to stick with, which tends to be more legacy, but is very appropriate for a lot of organizations.
Right. Yeah, we've seen a lot of individuals define the traditional box checking of moving something to the cloud versus truly multi-tenant SaaS. And I think the evolution of the technologies is up and coming as well. You have to remember, a lot of the systems and technology platforms that are implemented in large companies like the pharmaceutical industry and all have been there for quite a while, right? Been there a decade or more. So I think as we see the evolution of how these newer and late stage technology companies are developing capabilities, it's much more inclined in the cloud, and the adoption of a true SaaS environment by the regulated industries has become a lot more prominent in the industry as well. So I think we're going to see more and more of this occurring in the future. I know Dave has a lot of experience with solving some of these issues around building data lakes, but I even think that now is being being sunsetted in some capacities by providing just true interconnected workflows and interconnected technology stacks. Dave, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Well, just that I think there's a tendency amongst parts of the constituency to look at cloud as some magic answer to typically financial problems, financial challenges. And I think, I get in this discussion quite a bit and really recommend that you really have to take a total cost picture to these things. It's not about installation. I mean, installing provisioning systems is a trivial part of the actual cost to an organization of any particular system. It's the actual ongoing support, and there are pluses and minuses to varying levels of quote unquote cloud-based systems, based on the way the provider is actually doing that, how efficient and effective they are. If they're truly doing multi-tenant and coordinated releases, then you have to be aware that may impact your change management processes quite severely. Right. And that's costly. So having to revalidate systems with the current CSV approaches is very expensive, and so there's a lot to be put on the table there, and sort of in that total picture. The other piece, since we're talking about data and digital transformation here, that I don't think necessarily gets enough thought put to it in these kinds of decision making is, again, what is the relationship between this system's data and other data, right? And integration across clouds and integration across on-prem cloud has a whole set of challenges unique in and of itself. Typically vendors, particularly vendors that are providing strong managed service SLAs and multi-tenant types of things, have to have for their business model constraints on how data flows in and out of their systems. They won't let you do anything possible, right, that you might do, because they're at the end of the day responsible for operating that system. If it goes down because your direct connection to their database did something, then they're at fault in the way the contracts are typically structured. So sometimes it's a little bit of a hands-off, with respect to some of the underlying data. And integration patterns are very, very important to look at before understanding, whether or not that cloud approach is truly as financially attractive, operationally attractive as it looks to be. A lot of times you just kick the cost into a different part of the program, and not really in the net don't save anything.
Yeah, and then just to add to that, right, Dave, I mean, if you're looking purely from a quality organization standpoint, cloud is the way to go today, right? I mean, for all the right reasons. I mean, if the validation things you were talking about, typically, if you ask any organization, they say 20 to 30% of my costs are related to validation. Right. So if all the CSA regulation that will be coming up pretty soon, where it's forcing people to go towards a lot more lean documentation, right? And it also helps if you move to a cloud-based solution, the onus falls on the vendor, not you, to at least do IQs and OQs, and while you just do the PQs, right? So you're at least coming down to 10 to 15% cost saving just doing that.
I think there's clearly a lot of excitement about what the cloud can do. I think that's sometimes coupled with caution on the cloud and privacy and so on and so forth. But when you look at the wider business, if we're focusing, start with here on R&D, for example, but if you look at the wider business, probably somewhere in their organizations, they're already using the cloud successfully, in finance, in HR, in clinical trials, for example. So the data might be just as sensitive as R&D data, but probably for different reasons. So I always recommend anybody considering or worried about the cloud, check in other parts of your organization, see who's already adopted cloud solutions, what lessons have they learned, how have they mitigated these risks that we've just described. There's almost certainly an experience somewhere in the organization already.
There's two very interesting follow-up questions, I think, that it's probably appropriate to ask on this. The first one would be, how do you address a customer who's concerned digital transformation will leave them open to hackers? So Elliot, you were kind of just talking about that. So maybe pick up right from where you were just at and see if you can expand on that and see if anybody wants to chime in on that as well.
Yeah, I think, again, it depends. It's like any other technology, due diligence of the vendor, due diligence of their security policies. There's, you often see with these extensive cybersecurity assessments of vendors these days, and it's necessary to make sure you have the confidence in a vendor and their way of managing your data. So I think that's absolutely appropriate. But again, a lot of the technologies I think Dave mentioned earlier, that they're established, right? They're, somebody using as the basis of their technology Amazon Web Services. These guys have done it hundreds of times, thousands of times for other organizations. Right. And a lot of the more modern technology vendors are just piggybacking on that. They're not reinventing security models. They're using things that are very established. Otherwise, for everybody, it's a missed opportunity to just try and add your own security policy to something that has already been well established.
I would add to that. I see a lot of false equivalencies in this kind of analysis. To be quite blunt, if you think in-house you can do better at operating a data center than Amazon does, you're in the wrong place. And I'm not trying to sell Amazon. Azure and Google Cloud would be apply the same way. I mean, these guys, this is what they do. And anybody trying to make the argument that on-prem is somehow or other more hacker resistant does not understand how much effort it actually takes to maintain a security profile in an actively used environment. It's not that they're faultless. I mean, those systems have vulnerabilities. If you actually look behind, some of the more dramatic cases of problems in those systems, you'll find a lot of that is actually misconfiguration and misuse of the systems, honestly. But and they do things wrong. Technology is at its core fundamentally vulnerable to hacking. It is the grand trade-off here. There is no magic, unpenetrable, way to do it other than to never let go of the data, which means not to digitize. So, if you're going to digitize, I think the false equivalency everyone pointed out is somehow or other on-prem data is more secure than data in AWS. That's just, I just don't believe it from a fundamental perspective. As long as you're using the technologies appropriately, right? You can misuse, any of the cloud-based technology providers. They're full of better practice guidebooks and recommendations, and there's all kinds of really good material out there, OWASP guidebooks on how system design should work, all those types of things to do the right things. But fundamentally, from a hacking point of view, you're probably more hackable than Amazon is.
That's for sure. And I think the digital transformation roadmap journey should have a thread of cybersecurity. As you start replacing infrastructure, as you start moving to the cloud, as you start putting mobile devices, as you start, building data warehouses and data storage and AI, you have to think about cybersecurity in a holistic way. You can't think about it in each little thread of application or each data store, because the hackers know how to thread through the multiple applications, through the multiple layers of your technical architecture. And I would encourage, one, have cybersecurity as part of your planning process. Two, use the assessment and vulnerability testing and capabilities that are out in the marketplace constantly. Keep testing your environment, because in a journey, things are changing all the time, and every time something changes, you become more vulnerable. And third, I would echo the fact that the clouds are more secure than any on-prem or anything that you build in-house. It's just by nature, they're building it for many users. They have much more dollars to spend on cyber resilience. And as a result, as you start moving to these new digital transformation applications, SaaS, cloud, you will pick up a layer of cybersecurity resilience that you didn't have before.
Yep. And I'll go back to something I said, I think in the first little bit there. It's people that are the weak spot, actually, in all these systems. So, social engineering, social hacking, that form of attack vector is and will continue to be the weak spot in all of our systems. And there's, that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, I mean, the actual, from a technical point of view, as you just said, Amazon's SLAs on data integrity put in S3 buckets are just way beyond what you could ever get to doing anything yourself. With data center replication, availability zones, and everything else, the redundancies that are built in, that's money that you should not be putting into your data centers. Absolutely not, under no circumstance. That you're just wasting money.
I mean, look, I think Dave, you guys all hit it on a common thread here. That as this technology evolves, as the need for these connected systems, it also needs the people aspect to evolve along with it, right? The change management component of thinking differently, thinking more innovatively, and really truly sitting back and learning the advancements that have been made in companies like Amazon and Azure and Google Cloud, et cetera, and how sound, scalable, and useful they can be, and pretty secure as well.
I think, along with the people aspect, one of the things we haven't talked about is the customer experience. And as the new systems and technology and all the data and all the layers come in, there's this layer of how do you interact with your both internal and external users. In the lab, it's mostly internal users, but how do you make that experience better as opposed to the old green screens, which moved to a better model? They're continuing to evolve either on tablets or on mobile devices, but become a lot easier to use and a lot more effective. And that sounds easy, but it's not. And there's really a whole discipline around customer experience development that will make or break your digital transformation, because you've got to understand your user and how the user uses the system. It goes around this process corner of the slide that you're seeing. But don't forget about how do you upgrade your customer experience. If you look at the financial services and other areas, they totally transform the way customers interact with the system. You've got an opportunity to do the same thing with all of your end users.
That's great. Fantastic answers, obviously, to a super, super important question. We are about 10 minutes out from the hour, and I think this is a great question to ask and get some opinion on right now, and then maybe we can have Dale kind of close this out with some thoughts. How do you measure success of all this? So how do you measure success of a digital transformation program or project at your company? So I think that's a good, probably last question for the group to ponder and hear some wisdom on.
Yeah, wow. There's a number. Go ahead, Srikanth.
No, I was just saying, I think this will have different perspective from, I'm sure everybody has different perspective on this. At least the way I see it, right? I mean, I don't think it's easy to measure success of a digital transformation, right? It's not as easy as, yep, I put in an SAP platform, but that's fine. But, you know, by nature, you know, digital transformation is a never-ending journey, right? Because it's more of a continuous transformation you need to do, right? I mean, there is no finite endpoint to it. So how do you measure success of a program that does not have an end? It's like you claiming a victory when the war is still ongoing, right? I mean, it's not that easy. But what you can do is have small victories along the way, right? I mean, you know, you just need to make sure that, you know, as long as you know, like for example, like, you know, take stock of your digital maturity program that you have today and the roadmap that you have. Is that moving your digital maturity curve in the right direction, right? You know, are the processes and the technologies you're using, how are they maturing over the time, or even that implementation? Are you moving from a point solution to an on-prem, or are you moving from an on-prem to a cloud? Are your processes today manual? Are they becoming more intelligent and automated? Those are all the stocks that you can actually take along the digital maturity curve, right? And then also you can actually have tangible KPIs and metrics to measure those more from an operation standpoint. I look at it from an operation standpoint, Dale, because, you know, from a quality, it's more, we do most of the transformations in the operation world. So, you know, we look at it and say, okay, once I'm putting together this maturity model and I'm, you know, taking the journey along the way, what are my operational efficiency gains and how are my metrics measured as part of that, right? Are my CAPAs, if I take an example of, you know, again, biggest pain points, are my CAPAs going down? Are my deviations going down? Are my review time and approval time going down, right? And that actually translates directly to my cost, and it actually brings my total cost of quality down, right? So that can be easily measured. So again, you know, we need to just ensure, and again, you know, I don't want to end any question without talking about people again. Again, you know, employee engagement index is another great way to measure your success of your digital transformation program, right? End of the day, you know, to ensure that, you know, people are using the systems that you're bringing in, they're bought into the systems that you're bringing in. There's a good level of communication that actually goes through to make sure that there is a buy-in from your employees as you go through this program. And you just need to ensure, right? I mean, you know, that we live in a workforce of where everybody is digitally native, right? I mean, they're used to doing everything personally, like digitally in their personal lives. They just expect everything professional as in their professional lives as well. So we just need to make sure we are creating a professional environment for them where people can come in and thrive, and their employee engagement and morale goes up, right? So all these things are small victories you actually gain along the way.
So I would, oops, sorry. Go ahead, Larry.
I would think that all of these key KPIs and objectives would be thought about day one in the roadmap and the planning process. Why are you doing this to start with, right? And
Yep.
the organization is going to have a different set of whys, and they're going to have a different set of KPIs. Some organizations are doing it to remain competitive, okay? And what does that mean to your business, and why are you doing it? Some are going to do it also, or instead of, because of efficiencies. They want efficiency organizations. They want to, you know, change the workforce and mix up, and, you know, put remote workers and do other things. So there's, you know, a dozen different things and objectives for digital transformation. That's one thing. And each organization has to prioritize and look at their own, why they're doing this. And once you figure out the why, then those measurement metrics become the, ongoing evolutionary we talk about as far as, success.
Yep.
And I think, sorry, some kind of classic ROI type measurements would be around efficiency and quality, but when it comes to digital transformation, I mean, the clue's kind of in the name. You're doing things that are perhaps fundamentally not possible today, or were really hard. So how do you measure the difference between the before and after case? It's pretty tough to do that.
If it's truly transformative, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's to be truly transformative, right? That's the key to me. It's like a lot of our programs, our methodologies around ROI analysis and before and after and all those kinds of things are all based on incremental improvement types of things. If you're truly running a transformative program, if that is your goal, then you need to have high-level reasons, to Larry's point, for why you're doing it. What are you trying to achieve? We're trying to break through into new markets. We're trying, whatever it is, right? And those things are going to be, by their nature, they're going to be very, very difficult to quantify, right? So one of the things that I try to do is, like, while you're moving through that roadmap, and this is what you were saying there, like, while you're moving through the roadmap, each step in the road, you should be able to put together sort of, 4 or 5 bullets, and that's all you need about what do we get from this step? What do we get from this step? What do we get from this step? Now, somebody has to keep the bigger picture in mind, that all of those things are adding up to the path. But, measuring success, do it a step at a time. Trying to indent KPIs and put together some fancy dashboard and blah, blah, blah for a 3-year, 5-year journey is just, in my mind, not a very productive use of time. Make sure the steps that you're taking are actually quantified, measurable, that you're checking them off, and that are in alignment with where you're trying to get in the end.
Yeah, a lot of the succession. Sorry, Larry, carry on.
Really modernizing your business. You're not digitizing your business, right? So, as you modernize your business, it really depends on what industry you're in and who you are, who your competitors are, and what you're doing. But you're really trying to move the business forward and use technology and use all these things that we just talked about to help move the business forward. Because if you don't, you're going to be in the dark ages. And it's like the first time you adopted IT to start with. If you didn't do it, you're out of business. So this is just an evolutionary process of moving the business forward, and therefore you've got to start measuring things at the high level, not at the technology.
That aligns with what I was thinking. I mean, if your measurement really is what you're doing taking you forward a step in that journey, in that plan. So, it's a foundation for moving forward. So again, it's a bit more of a qualitative measurement, but is it taking you towards your wider corporate goals?
Yeah. And also one last thing to add to that, Elliot, is also the fact that I think, Dave, you were mentioning 3 to 5 year digital transformation programs, right? Usually, the other challenges you actually come with that is, it's digital landscape changes so fast, right? I mean, so, you need to have a process in place to make sure that you're continuously monitoring the pulse of the digital landscape. So you can go back and redo or make adjustments to your strategy if there's new smart technologies and smart innovation technologies coming out. How much of an effort is for you to kind of make that change, right? Is that going to be a significant effort? So you just need to make sure that there's, your strategy is open enough to accommodate some of those disruptions that are going to happen while you go through this journey. So.
That's great. Thank you, obviously, everybody, for some great answers to those questions. We are at the 1:59 mark, so we came in right in a minute. Hopefully enough time for Dale to close this out and give us some thoughts, and then I'll wrap up with a few house cleaning items.
Yeah, well, listen, first and foremost, I want to thank the panelists that attended this and helped. It's just an incredible discussion. It's no surprise that the slide that you're looking at touches on 3 fundamental principles of digital transformation. Not any one of those is the answer. They all have to work in unison and uniform as we evolve to digitally transform a laboratory or an ecosystem or organization. People are critically important. We've run many of these types of programs, and we've noticed that, as a vendor independent organization like Astrix, it's not a specific technology or a platform. It's varying degrees of technology advancement that's happening. We don't really dote on any single platform for the most part. People are critical. People with the right domain experience and understand why you're doing the things that you're doing. We talked about roadmap and really understanding a clear indication on, okay, this is why we're doing digital transformation. These are our objectives that we have in front of us over the next 3 to 5 years, and clearly defining those outcomes and that roadmap is really critical. And again, processes, right? So in looking at ways to make things much more efficient, effective for the organization. And this is also an exciting type of program inside of companies, small or large. We work with companies that are small startup biotech companies to the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And when you get a type of a digital transformation initiative like this underway, it really does energize an organization. It gets a lot of people behind it, and it almost acts as a catalyst to change in itself. People really just are excited to see what the outcome of something like this could be and get behind it. So, I think all three of these elements are critical to making sure that digital transformation is achievable. If you want to learn more about some of the aspects of digital transformation, we do have an ebook here that I've provided. You'll receive information to be able to download this, but feel free to do that. Again, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to listen to this webcast series. I found it a great discussion, etc. Thank again to all the panelists that attended. And we'll hope to see you again for another session here in a few weeks. But for that, I appreciate